Retirement, it's the dream, right? But what if you only have $400,000 saved? Is it even possible to retire at 62 and still live comfortably? So in this video, I'm breaking down the numbers, sharing strategies, and showing you exactly how to make the most of what you have to create the retirement you've been dreaming of. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Simply Money. Today we're going to be looking at a scenario of a couple who have $400,000 and they want to retire at 62. We're going to break down the numbers. We're going to look at their Social Security. We're going to look at their rate of return. We're going to run a Monte Carlo to see what their probability of success is and discuss some options that they could do along the way. Because one of the things I like to discuss here at Simply Money is that retirement planning should not be static. You need to come up with a plan. We definitely can't go into retirement without a plan. If you want to achieve financial freedom, it starts with a goal, it requires a plan, and then you have to be able to make adjustments. You can't be rigid. And when you go and begin to, whether it's retirement or early retirement, financial independence, when you begin that journey, you have to be flexible. Flexibility doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have to make cuts. We're going to actually look at some scenarios where you may be able to increase your spending. But knowing that you have these guardrails and maybe you need to reduce spending at this point, or you can increase spending at another point, that's where knowing where your money is, where it needs to go, what your budget expectations are, what you can cut, and where you'd like to add. And so we're going to look at these different scenarios. So let's start here with the graph that I like to use. Just a simple little Excel sheet that I created showing the different scenarios, different forms of income. We're going to start right here with the balance. They have $400,000. Again, this couple has $20,000 in an emergency fund. It's earning minimal. It's not considered part of their assets for growth. In fact, one thing I would maybe encourage them to do is prior to their retirement is try to beef that up a little bit. Because as you can see here, their annual income needs in retirement is $60,000. I would like to see them build up at least 6 months of income into that emergency fund, if not even up to a year. Because what that does is it allows you to draw that down a little bit if the market is really low. It gives you a little extra cushion of cash where you don't have to take a withdrawal or as much withdrawal from your investments in a down market. Again, those are different scenarios we can look at, but that is one suggestion I would make here. Again, they need $60,000 annual income in retirement. I don't know the breakdown of this. I don't know if this is all fixed expenses. Do they have any debt that'll be paid off where that could be decreased? How much of this is discretionary spending versus required expenses? Do they have a mortgage that's going to be paid off? I don't know any of the details there. This is the information I'm going off of. Those are things to consider. If you have a mortgage and it's going to be paid off in 10 years, your expenses are going to drop drastically then. Perhaps you still have car payments and those will be paid off. Any kind of debt that could reduce the income that you need. Those are things that are nice to know in this. If you submit a request to go through this, that type of information just generically helps us formulate a better idea of what you could do. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. You're going to have to do your own due diligence. The reason I started this channel is simply to provide information and encouragement for people. You still have to make your own decisions. You still have to do your own homework and due diligence on what is best for you and your family, because it's your finances. And we don't know everything, including the most important part. What is your risk tolerance? Some people have a higher tolerance. They don't get all stressed out. Other people have a very low tolerance. In the slightest movement, they want everything fixed and secure. You have to make those decisions on what's going to make the best quality of life for you in your financial freedom journey. This is just a scenario to show you what is possible. So in this scenario, because of how they're invested, and we'll look at those investments on the Monte Carlo in a few minutes, they're getting 1.3% dividend yield. And the rate of return that I've put in here is 6%. I always try to put the lower end of what's expected from their portfolio mix, just because I'd rather come up short, and this is the worst case scenario, and then outperform that. I did that with my own finances. I was going the lower end, more conservative, and then best case scenario, have a lot of extra money to do things I want to do or leave for an inheritance for my children. This couple is going to plan on retiring. The wife is actually 62 and the husband is actually 60. So we're going to be looking at the first Social Security, which she was the higher earner, and her Social Security is going to be $2,000 a month at 62. And the spouse, his Social Security, when he turns 62, is going to be $1,200 a month. And that will kick in 2 years after the 62 for the main spouse, for the wife. I put in inflation at 3%. Again, inflation's not always going to be 3%. Some years it's going to be 6%. It may go up to 10%. It may go down to 1%. But on average, over long term, 3% is a good average to put in. It's the same way with the rate of return. We're not going to get 6%, 6%, 6%. We might get negative 6%. We might get 20%. It all depends on how the markets are moving, but that is a good average to go through this scenario. But 62, they have $400,000. The wife retires at 62. The husband at 60 is going to retire as well. They will get $24,000 from her Social Security. They won't get any from his at the time. The dividends from this portfolio would pay about $5,200 that first year. It means they'd have to withdraw $30,800. That's a 7.7% withdrawal rate. This, as you can see, these first 2 years are something you're going to want to watch. They would want to keep an eye on this. This is critical because the sequence of returns, if they have a really bad first couple years of return and they're having to withdraw 7%, that could be very devastating for the long term. And so that's something we'll have to look at as well. Again, another reason why having a larger cushion of cash to help buffer against that and ride that out so you don't have to take that withdrawal and not impact your assets as much. This is where they're starting and what we'll look at. And the portfolio would grow after withdrawals if they had an average year, 24,000, which would bring the ending balance to 393,000. Let's look at a couple things here. We're going to skip down to when she's 64, he would be turning 62. His Social Security, number 2, kicks in here. It'd be $1,200 because of increase of inflation and all. In 2 years, it should be around $14,400. So between them now, they're getting $39,800 in Social Security. Their dividend is paying $5,000. It's gone down because the balance, that 1.3% against the balance has gone down. So they're getting a little less on their dividend. But now, because they have the second Social Security, they only have to withdraw just under $17,000, which puts it down to 4.37% withdrawal rate against your portfolio, which is a good amount. Some people say you have to be at 4% for it to last. Some people even say 3%. And you have those who are extreme high risk who say you can withdraw 8 or 9% consistently. Again, any of these things all come with a measure of caution that you have to be flexible because depending on the market. Let's look at an example. This first year, they withdrew 7.7%. If the market was up 20% that year, that would be no issue at all because their portfolio would have actually grown even though they took out 8%. They would have grown by 12% on top of that. They would have been looking at several $1,000s more added to their account. So instead of going down, they're going up. But if the market was a negative 10% and they took out their 7.7%, now you're looking at a drop in your assets of 18% almost. That can be a very difficult start to a portfolio. So there's no cut and dry rule. These rules, the 4% rule, all these types of things you hear, they are guidelines. And please, when you hear those, take them as guides, not as static, cut and dry, have to be followed to the T rules because nobody knows what 10, 20, 30 years is going to look like. And I say this all the time. It's no different than that. If you're 30 years old and you're looking at retiring at 60, you don't know how much you're going to be making in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You don't know what might happen along the way. You have no idea on all of those. You make a plan and you adjust and change to reach that goal as life unfolds. And the same happens in retirement. When you start living financially free, you have to make adjustments year by year. As you can see in this scenario, I bring it down to where I go up to 100 years old, that they don't run out of money until she's 98, he'd be 96. That's when they begin to, if everything was static, that's when they would expect to run out of money. So this provides them plenty of money for the long term. So yes, $400,000 with an annual need of $60,000 a year with their Social Security. Now, this may not work for you if your Social Security combined is only $1,500. This wouldn't work for you. But maybe your Social Security is higher than theirs and you have this amount, you might be able to spend a little bit more. Depends on your portfolio, your asset allocation. So these are all different things that everybody is unique, that you have to be willing to take these as guidelines and say, okay, it is possible. And the reason I like showing this is because there's people out there saying you need $2, $5, $10 million to retire. And I just think that's baloney and puts people in this very downtrodden mode, and it causes a lot of people to not even begin to try because they're like, what's the use? I'll never retire. So instead of retiring with $400,000, they retire with nothing. Whereas if they had that hope and encouragement, like, I only need to get to 200, 300, 400,000, depending on your situation. Do you have a pension? What's your Social Security going to look like? Are you out of debt? Do you own your home? All of these factors change every scenario. And even within a scenario that is individualized, it has to be flexible and change. So this is something that this chart helps you just visualize that it is possible, what it would look like. And as you can see, the income goes up by 3% every year. And again, that's not how life works. You don't necessarily spend 3% more or keep up with inflation year over year. We do this so you see the spending power is the same. But when you're 62, $60,000 a year, you may be traveling. You may be doing different things. My parents retired when they were 55 and 52, and they spent their first 7 years living on the road. They sold their house, put that money in the bank. They got in a camper and their fifth wheel, and they traveled around the country. They were bouncing from one corner of this country to the other corner of the country, and they'd stay somewhere for a day or a week or a month. They had no agenda and they just moved. But their spending actually decreased as they got older. Once they decided they were done full-time traveling, they bought another house, they settled in there, and they weren't traveling as much. They were still spending money on some entertainment and things. But then as they increased even longer, 15 years, 20 years into the retirement, that spending went way down. And so that's how life works. You may spend more up front, and then that decreases. As it's called, you got the go-go years, your slow-go years, and your no-go years. Doesn't mean you don't do anything, but your expenses do drastically drop. But you also have to consider long-term health care. What if one of the spouses needs to be put into a nursing home or a facility where it's costing an extraordinary amount of money? If you don't have the ability to self-fund that, self-insure yourself, you don't have enough liquid assets that would not destroy the other individual's ability to stay retired, then you need to make sure you have long-term care insurance. Now, if you're single and you can burn through all of your money because you have no one you have to worry about leaving money for their lifetime, then that's fine. You don't need long-term health care. You can sell your house. You can use that equity, whatever the case might be. Again, individualized and what your tolerance is. Now let's look over at the Monte Carlo just to get a feel of what this looks like. We're going to go, they have asset classes that they provided me. They did not provide me with a full breakdown of what they're invested in, just what their percentage in these different asset classes. So I've done the best I can here to give a semblance of paralleling their portfolio. Now I want to look here. What I'm starting with on the Monte Carlo is this age 64 for the wife, because that's when the husband kicks in. The Monte Carlo, the one I'm using, doesn't have the dynamic feature to be able to say, okay, it's going to be 30,000 withdrawal the first year, second year, then it drops this amount. It doesn't take in Social Security in this one. So I'm just starting here with the amount that we forecast them having at 64. And this amount, I'm just going to say 17,000 of what they need to withdraw from that asset class. So we have the $386,000. We're going to withdraw a fixed amount, and we're going to just say annually, even though most people would take it monthly or quarterly. We're just going to say you're going to take each year $17,000, and it's going to be adjusted to inflation. So next year, 17,000 times 3%, and the year after at 3%. And so each year that withdrawal amount is going up 3%. And I've put in this for 35 years. Most plans put in 30 years. I put on my Excel sheet up to 100. I like people to be able to see, hey, what if 35 years, what if we lived to 90, 95? There are people living into the centennial age, 100 years plus. I'm just putting it there. Again, you can make adjustments. If your longevity in your family that nobody's ever lived past 70, you have health conditions. I don't know all that. You know that. And if you feel like you can take a little more risk because you don't expect to live 35 more years, then that's your business. And you need to make those adjustments. I like to do this to give the overview of what it could do in those cases. We're not making any sequence of return adjustments, meaning this is going to run 10,000 scenarios of all sorts. We'll come back and adjust this in a minute to show the difference. Now, their asset classes, 25% in 4 categories: the U.S. large cap value, and U.S. large cap growth. And then they have a total U.S. bond market, each of those comprising 25%. So about $100,000 in each of those. Again, remember, they have $20,000 in a savings account, a checking account, whatever they have that allocated as. So on this, with the Monte Carlo, it shows a 91% probability of success. It survives that withdrawal of $17,000 with their Social Security in 35 years. Now down here, you can see this graph. You can see how, let's see, at 82, on the best possibility of the most lucky person, they have $3.2 million. Where the worst scenario, taking these 10,000 trials, they'd only have 332,000, which is still good. At 82, they haven't really withdrawn that much, less than a quarter of their entire portfolio. So they're still in good shape. But I want to show you this because let's say at 72, now they're at 1.2 million if they're the best scenario, and 327,000 on the worst. So in the worst scenario, maybe they say, okay, we're going to travel a little less. We're going to cut a little bit. Maybe we're going to spend 5,000 less a year to help buffer that, because things are not horrible, but they're not really looking great. So we just want to be careful in case we do have that longevity. But let's say on the flip side, those 10 years have been fantastic and they have $1.2 million instead of $400,000 or the $327,000. So maybe at this point they say, hey, you know what? We're still healthy. We're still doing good. We want to travel some more. Or, hey, we want to give a little bit to our kids for them to enjoy now while we're still here to watch them enjoy it. Or they want to give a little bit to a charity, whatever the case might be, because they saw that they're in a little better condition than other situations. That's the best scenario. And then you have everything in between. That's what I mean about making adjustments as life goes on. You don't know where you'll be. And should we cut back a little? Can we spend a little bit more? Can we give a little bit more? Whatever the case might be. Last thing, let's go up here. We're going to change the sequence of returns. I like to show this for people to understand how those first few years can really impact you. So on this one, we had no adjustments. It was 91% success. We're going to go 2 years. So the first 2 years of this scenario are the worst 2 years. Think of the worst down market throughout the U.S. stock market history. The first 2 years are going to be the worst 2 years ever. That's the worst case scenario sequence of returns. So we're going to run that and see what that would look like and how big of a difference that makes. And this is where you'd have to make adjustments. As you can see here, now it drops to a 64% success rate. It's because those first few years, the market was really down and you also had to withdraw money to live on. and that really drops your ability to survive long term. You see here at uh, 17 years in the worst scenario, they're broke. So 79, a lot of people are living past that. I would not be comfortable with having that little amount if worst case scenarios hit. So maybe those first 2 years, you retire. Okay, you don't get to travel as much, but you still have the freedom to do things and time is on your hand. Or maybe you say, you know what, I'm going to work a part-time job this year because the market's been down. Or you ride out those 2 years and you see what happens after that. Look at after 5 years, you can see the bottom 10%, they're in really rough shape if they haven't made some adjustments. Maybe they have discretionary spending of $10,000 a year. So instead of $60K, they only take $50K for that first year or that second year as the market's really down. Then they wait for it to recover and they say, okay, now we can start spending a little bit more. Again, you have to make these decisions. And this isn't to say, yes, go ahead and retire, or no, don't retire. It's just to show you what's possible and how you just have to make adjustments along the way. So after 5 years, if things recover well, you could be back into good shape and then move on and see where things go. Again, the Monte Carlo just gives you the ability to make those adjustments, and 2 years is usually a good way to put it in there to see how would it fare the first 2 years of the worst 2 years. Maybe we only have one bad year. Let's just pretend 2022 was really pretty bad, but 2023 has been a great recovery. What would just one bad year look like? So instead of 64% on the first 2 years being bad, 1 year being bad brings it down to just that 83%. So that's not bad. That's still a very nice percentage. Again, that's your percentage of success in 10,000 scenarios. All that means is the other, 84%? The other 16% of the time, you just have to make adjustments. Doesn't mean it's going to fail. It means if you don't make any adjustments and everything goes in those scenarios, yes, you would run out of money at about 25 years into it, which is pretty good now. You're looking at 87 years old. So you've made it a good long time. But if you want to try to see if this can last through 35, maybe you have to make some adjustments in a 1 year sequence of returns negative. So again, make decisions. In this case, after 5 years, the first year was really bad, but maybe things recovered well. Now you're up above where you started, so you can readjust again. All of this to show you so much is possible. Don't think you need millions of dollars to retire. Get on a budget, get out of debt, reduce your income requirements, know what it is you want to do when you retire as well. Set up a plan for what would my retirement budget look like? What income will I need? If you're close to retirement, that'll be pretty easy. If you're 30 years old, you're going to be like, I don't know what I'm going to need in 25, 30, 35 years. Just start making the plan to put the money there as you get closer. Trust me, what you think you're going to want to do now, when you become 50, 60 years old, you may not want to do any of that. So the goal at 30, 35 isn't necessarily to make the plan, what do I want to do when I retire, but to have the funds there to choose what you want to do at that time and be able to do it. So if you're younger, you have the most valuable thing at your disposal, and that's check out the video on the power of compounding. And the longer you have, the more powerful it is. For those that are older, in your 50s, even maybe at 60, and you're getting real close to retirement, now part of what you need to do is not only have the finances in place, but what is it you want to do? How do you want to spend your retirement days? Think through that. Make a plan. And again, with this, be flexible. Try things. This might be a great time to do things that you never had time to do before and see if you like it. And you may not. We're here to help you on Simply Money. Check out in the description the Simply Money Mall, all things money, where you can budget, you can get out of debt. There's ways to learn how to decrease spending. There's tools to help you find deals on insurance and loans. And whatever it is you need, everything financial is there, educational, community. Check out the link, get your free member key, and join that community. And thank you for joining us on Simply Money. Hit that like and subscribe button. Leave me a comment. What kind of scenario do you want to see? And do you think this is helpful? What do you think? And we'll talk to you next time on Simply Money.